More than any other time in the past, we need to connect ourselves and children with nature and the environment. My name is Kevin O'Shea, and I'm an environmental educator who wants to connect all of you with a bit of inspiration. In each episode of the Nature Talks podcast, I'll talk to incredible educators, scientists, thinkers, and innovators who are connecting those around them to nature and the outdoors and inspiring new generations of environmental stewards. Well, hey there, everyone, and welcome to episode number 19 of the Nature Talks podcast, the environmental education podcast, a podcast about all things caring for the world, making it a better place, and doing the best we can to make all those things happen. It's me, Kevin O'Shea, your host. I'm a Canadian international school teacher, currently living in Shenzhen, China, but in a few months, I'll be off to Japan, then Canada, and then my family and I will be settling into a new home in Malaysia. Very excited about that. This episode, I should say, because really this podcast, my goal is to really just get it out a couple of times a month, and that just has to do with my life schedule. Maybe in the future it will come out more often, but I have other projects I'm often busy with. So if I can get this out a couple of times a month, I'm happy, and I know you guys are going to be happy to get this content. In this episode, I will be talking to returning guest Kenny Peavy. Kenny was featured in episode number 11 of the podcast, and Kenny is a tour de force when it comes to environmental education, outdoor education, and getting the message out to the masses and using social media to get his message across. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this episode. So sit back and take a listen to my conversation with outdoor educator from Green School Bali, Kenny Peavy. So, everyone, I'm very happy to have returning with us for another episode of the Nature Talks podcast, Kenny Peavy. Kenny, thank you for coming back on the show.
Yes, I'm really happy to be here. And, of course, I'll always see your social media, Twitter, LinkedIn. So I'm kind of keeping up with what you're doing. I think vice versa.
Good. That's something we'll talk about later on in the podcast, but I can barely keep up with you, and I don't think I can. But that you're a bit of a whirlwind in a positive way, which is a great thing with regards to the social media. I don't know how you find the time to do it, and that's something that people used to say about me.
Right. But yeah. So, let's definitely chat about that in a bit.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Kenny, I was wondering for the people who may be listening to the show for the first time, maybe they haven't listened to episode 11, which you were featured on, and for those of you that are listening after you listen to this podcast, go back and listen to episode 11, and you can learn a lot more about Kenny and what he does. But kind of in a nutshell, could you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, where you are, and what you do?
Yes, I'm originally from the States, from America. I've been overseas since the year 2000, so that's roughly 23 years. And in that time, I've worked in a couple of different schools at the International School of Kuala Lumpur. At the time, it was called Bogor Expatriate School outside of Jakarta. I think they've changed their name to something like Intercultural School of Bogor now. And then for about 10, I'll say 8-9 years, I was doing my own sort of adventure. What would you call it? I guess educational travel adventure company throughout Southeast Asia. And we were mostly doing service projects, adventure, cultural immersion, and ecology. So, basically up in Chiang Mai, mostly outside of Bangkok and some of the national forests, and then throughout Indonesia. So yeah, I've been here. I'm currently at the Green School in Bali, and I've been here this is my third year. And I'm really happy to be back on the show. So
awesome.
Happy to chat with you.
Cool stuff. And in episode 11, you took a little bit of a deeper dive into talking to us about Green School Bali and what you do there and the things you like about it. So for all you folks who are, a lot of people are always very fascinated with Green School Bali. If you go back, again, I keep throwing this out, listen to episode 11 and you can find out more about what Kenny does there. And we'll touch upon that for sure. But, as I'm kind of restarting the podcast after a hiatus, I want to get you back on because I think when I talk about often that I'm a big proponent, big utilizer of social media when it comes to education and doing what I do for professional reasons and for fun. You are someone that I am constantly seeing pop up no matter where I go on social media. So I'm curious. I mean, I see you on LinkedIn, I see you on Instagram, on YouTube, on Twitter. Were you always a big social media person, or is this something that you've recently, platforms you've recently started to utilize?
It's pretty new. In fact, anyone that knows me, I was reluctant to even get a smartphone in the beginning. I resisted up until the very end. I had my black and white Nokia brick phone up until I think maybe 2014 or 2015. So I'm definitely new to social media. But I've recently just gotten really excited and inspired. Some of my things that I posted, for whatever reason, caught on and people liked it and started sharing it. And so I found some success. So I just wanted to keep rolling that and keep inspiring people to get outdoors.
Nice.
So yeah, I definitely don't have much training in like how to utilize social media. I kind of look at the analytics once in a while and I'm like, yeah, I should probably publish it at this time or these dates, but I don't really know. And I get too excited. I'm like, I can't wait. I'm going to publish it now.
Yeah.
So, I know like real social media influencers and marketing people, they know what time and date and all that sort of, they look at the analytics and they're like, oh, it's best to publish on Tuesday morning at 8 a.m.
Yeah.
I know that.
I've seen that too.
I know that exists, but I get too excited. I'm like, I just made this cool video. I'm going to publish it now.
Yeah.
Which may or may not be the best way, but yeah, definitely not. It's pretty new for me, to be honest.
Cool. Well, I mean, it's new for you, but again, I'm seeing you all over the place, and that's in a very positive way. And that's interesting when you talk about the analytics. I know people who are very, very much so analytic nerds, and that's a big thing. And when you mentioned Tuesday morning at 8 a.m., I mean, I've done the research into podcasts. When's the best time to release a podcast? But I mean, like, I'm here in China at Tuesday at 8 a.m. I'm teaching. I can set tweets on TweetDeck to be timed and go out, but a podcast with China internet, who knows how that's going to work and when that's going to come out. So I get it out when I can, but also during the days I'm up to my eyeballs in 23 kindergarten students. Last thing I'm thinking about is like, when am I going to get that Instagram photo out or my tweet out? That's all for after work. But yeah, so you've got a message that you definitely have been passionate about for years. And you're new to the social media thing, but again, I'm seeing you in many spaces. What has you've already kind of hinted at that, but what kind of response have you been getting in general that's keeping you going?
Well, it's really cool when you see a post go viral. We all kind of like that, and it's really nice. When I started out, you might get 10 likes or 2 or 3 shares, and then suddenly you hit a nerve and people love it. And you're like, holy cow, I think probably the most viral post was about my nature spotters. And suddenly I'm like, it's got 58,000 impressions and it's been shared 112 times and like 200 likes. And then suddenly you're like, oh, well, people like that one.
Yeah.
And maybe I can keep doing this and keep, sharing ideas and then hopefully inspiring people to get outside. Because that really is my goal. Just go outside and play. And then after that, start researching, looking, discovering all the things that are out there in nature. And I will say, and this is interesting, and it's a recent thing, but I just posted an anti-plastics, the plastics in the garbage in the ocean and in the mangroves, and especially throughout Southeast Asia. It's just a big problem in Indonesia and Malaysia, Thailand. And it kind of is reverse, but I got attacked by a lot of pro-plastic industrial people, business people that were saying, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're talking about. And that kind of inspired me because I was like, well, I struck a nerve there too. Even though it was pretty negative. It was like, well, at least I'm generating some conversation and some awareness. And the people that are with me that do believe and have seen with their own eyes the impacts of plastic bags on the beaches in Bali and the mangroves in Thailand and everything. I'm like, okay, well, I touched a nerve, but maybe not in a positive way. Maybe some people got angry, especially those in the petroleum industry and the plastics industry. So that was recent, and that's why it's on my mind. Yeah. Suddenly you're like being attacked by people you don't know, which is not a good feeling. But then I had to reverse it and think, well, this is actually a good thing. I'm raising awareness. I'm starting a dialogue.
So. Absolutely. Yeah. I think so too. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, controversy is what brings eyeballs to things, right? Controversy is what gets people talking. When we talk about taking action, for example, we have those people who may be more of a kind of a grassroots thing where they're lobbying politicians. They're doing they're going around and collecting names on things. You've got people who go and do garbage pickups, and then you have people who do more intense protesting. And those intense protesters, sometimes I might not always agree with the way some people do things, but at the end of the day, they generate conversations. They bring a lens to things, and there's a conversation maybe amongst people who never would have had that conversation.
Exactly.
So controversy can be good for sure, and and sometimes when you look at it through that lens, it can be kind of fun to be involved in it.
Yeah, so I think those are the two main things. Like when you get the positive response and something goes viral, but then when you touch a nerve and someone is kind of arguing back, then you start a little controversy. So I think those two things are healthy at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. I want to, one thing before we started recording, and I want to kind of zip back a little bit. So, I mean, in the episode 11, you were on talking a lot about outdoor education and just, your passions with connecting kids with the outdoors. One thing that I can remember looking at your social media a few months back, but I wanted to kind of backtrack to that, is that you did a presentation to your colleagues about something that I've often found a lack of clarity with. So you did a presentation, I believe, about outdoor education versus educating outdoors, which I found is fascinating to let people know about, because a lot of people say to me, and we talked about this, hey, Kevin, you're an outdoor educator. You should do this or that. And I realized I have to clarify to them, outdoor education is different than what I do. I'm an environmental educator. I'm not qualified to take people on a kayaking trip or an outdoor adventure excursion. Bad things would probably happen. Just I can do it myself, but leading people. So can you let the people know, just out there listening, maybe a little bit about how you've been educating those around you about those differences?
Yes, and that is actually an awesome question that I never really pondered too much until I can't remember who, but someone brought it to my attention. And they were like, a lot of classroom teachers are afraid to take their kids outdoors because they feel like they don't have the skills and knowledge. And I was of the opinion, well, they can just teach their classroom lessons outside. And so we talked about it a bit more, and it was like making that distinction between outdoor education, which is its own respectable field in itself. And you have to be certified and qualified and, a wilderness first responder. You have to have knowledge of ropes. Risk and safety has to be a big thing, but then you have to know how to, paddle in upright kayaks and canoes. You have to know how to climb and bouldering and set anchors. And while I have some of those skills, just because I grew up outdoors, I don't have all of them. I'm not a climber. I have no idea how to do ropes and harnesses and set anchors. So that's why I always defer to the pros, the experts. And so, the distinction I made was like, outdoor education is a specialized field, and you have to have certifications and training in that. But education outdoors is something that I think anyone can do. A parent, a homeschooler, a classroom teacher, a scout leader, whatever you want to take outside, whatever lesson you want to teach, you can do it outside. And, just a couple of examples that I've been involved with, like in the primary school that I used to work at, I actually worked in the high school, but we took the primary school kids outside to read Where the Wild Things Are, which is a popular kids book. Yeah. And they dressed up as their favorite character. And we had a wild rumpus, I believe it was called.
Yeah, that's book, a party. Yeah, the wild rumpus. Yeah.
That was just, they could have sat in the classroom and read the book, but we were like, well, let's kind of reenact the wild rumpus and read the book outside, and the kids dress up. So that was just one kind of fun example, but I always gravitate towards, of course, science and math, because that's my training, and just teaching any sort of science lesson outside. Math lessons, like the other day in the middle school at Green School, we were doing the slope of a staircase. So, we went around and measured slopes, and instead of just doing only in the classroom, we did some outdoor activities. And then Another math one that we're going to do soon, which I think is popular, is just taking the kids outside and making water bottle rockets. And when we're doing geometry, we're going to talk about launching and angles and collecting data on how many pumps it takes and how much water. So, that's incorporating a whole lot of cool skills. Building, and manipulating, making your own water bottle. And I'm not the only one to think of this, but I think I might be highlighting it more and trying to get more classroom teachers feeling comfortable and confident taking their kids outdoors and feeling like they don't have to be an outdoor educator to do that. So whatever lesson they're going to do, whether it's art or, humanities or literature, math, science, dance, music, just take your kids outdoors and do it. And it would work in most cases.
Nice. Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. Like you said, a lot of people have that kind of hesitation about taking kids outside because they think, well, Kenny, you're the outdoor expert. It's easy for you to say you do all these things. But, when you take the kids out to read where the wild things are, they're not climbing. They're not bouldering. They're not in kayaks. They're just out in the schoolyard where they normally would play during unstructured time, where they have fun. So it's sometimes bringing a bit of that structured inside the room outside. Yeah. So, we talked in the last episode 11, we kind of talked about ways to kind of inspire teachers to get outside. I wanted to kind of branch off a little bit to talk about SDGs. And just kind of more broadly sustainability. That's one thing I want to do with the next series of episodes I'm putting out. I want to bring on guests who, of course, have the environmental education passion, have the outdoor education passion, but I want to talk to educators and people who are doing things that are kind of broader sustainability kind of practices, because maybe not everyone, maybe that's not their passion. Maybe the passion isn't the outdoors. But for example, in the last episode of the podcast, I interviewed a fantastic teacher whose passion is about fashion and clothing, and she created an incredible kind of clothing recycling program at our school that is basically it's absolutely it's really fascinating. She basically has staff all those clothes that I should say gently used clothing that people would normally throw away, they're now bringing to our school, and we have basically this massive space in our classroom, and I should say in our school, that almost kind of looks like a little mini department store where people can come and take things for free. And it's like a giant free clothing swap. But so when it comes to kind of broader sustainability things, I don't know, what is some kind of advice you might give to teachers about like kind of leading by example to students?
Yeah. Well, the formula that I have that I've used before is, choose something you love to do, kind of like your hobby. And then one of the SDGs or a social issue or a topic that you're passionate about, and combine those, and then you'll have a successful project. And the reason I say that, it's got to be something you love to do. And when we do this, I've done it as a workshop for students, like a global citizen type workshop. Okay. I'm like, what do you like to do? Play basketball, ride bicycles, cook, sewing, play games, cards, whatever. Okay, what do you care about? Poverty, orphanages, nature, rivers. Okay, now take one of those things you love to do and find a really creative way to combine it for a cause that you care about. So, it might sound silly, but these are what we generate during our brainstorming sessions, like shooting basketball hoops for a cause, for an orphanage. And then you start brainstorming. How can you do that? Well, we can get people to come to the gym. They can pay $1. They can shoot 3 hoops. We get some people to donate some prizes. Okay, now we have some money. We can do something with that money for the orphanage. And that's what we talk about with the students. One of the ones that we actually do here at Green School is every Wednesday they have a bunch of parents that come in, and the kids work with them, and they cook, and then they go around and distribute that food. So that's hitting a couple of the SDGs for poverty and no hunger and that sort of thing. But it combines the skills with a lot of our students love to cook, and it's a life skill that I think is really important. And then, it's a community, it's a camaraderie, and they're doing it with the parents. They package it up, they put it in banana leaves, and, then they go around and the parents take it to different villages and every week. So, combining cooking for no poverty, zero hunger, something like that. A couple of things that I've done, and you hit on it yourself, and I do believe it's fun, so that's why I do it. It's a little bit of a selfish thing, just because I love doing it. But being an example, so a couple that I've done myself is I've ridden a bamboo bicycle, from Thailand to Bali, and that was to raise awareness for sustainability, for conservation, but also to see if you could really have a bamboo bicycle that could do that. I think it's 1,600 kilometer trek.
Wow.
And so, it was fun. It wasn't like work. It was a good expedition. Me and my friend did it for 6 weeks, and we made, videos to show it to students and inspire other people to be aware of the local villages and the conservation efforts they're doing. One of the most successful I've personally been involved in is I love to sing and play guitar. So we used to have student bands, and we called it Rockin' for the Environment. And every year we would basically have like a battle of the bands. We would charge admission, and then we'd raise money and donate it to an NGO that was working for endangered species or conservation. So, combining with something you love, riding bicycles, cooking food, playing music, and just finding creative ways to do it. That program was pretty successful, and it was fun. We started really small with like a teacher band and a kid band. But by the end, we were playing in public places in Kuala Lumpur with like famous pop stars that would join in. And, we started off raising $500 or $1,000, but by the end we were raising $10,000, $15,000, and it was cool. And then I would know the NGOs personally, and I think that's key. And I would say, this is money for you to be used, for your endangered species, whatever that is, an educational project, an outreach project, a habitat restoration project. And I thought those were, number one, really fun, really successful, but also effective, because the people involved, you work directly with the NGOs. You're not just donating it to an anonymous, source that you don't know where the money's going to go.
Yeah. Wow.
So I think those are really good ways, just to have some fun, which I think is the most important part. Make it a fun thing, but then address some sort of social issue, environmental issue, global issue, SDGs.
Yeah, that's, right. There's so many things going through my brain right now. And I think I love that, taking that thing that you're passionate about, looking at all those SDGs and making a connection, which we can all do, right?
Right.
And I think, and I'm hoping that for educators who are based in China right now listening to this, take these lessons and think about it. And I think a lot of us here in China need to start to open our minds now, because for 3 years, we were basically locked into a cocoon here in China where we were, because of China's zero COVID policy, where we didn't have the freedom to do anything. We couldn't, we couldn't have a group of kids gather to shoot basketballs because we weren't allowed to have kids gather. We weren't allowed to have a concert to raise money because we couldn't have people gather. But now that's done with, thankfully, and things are opening up. And I think that this is a conversation I've had with other educators, that restrictions have dropped and we can now kind of move on to regular life, but we're always kind of looking over our shoulder, thinking we're about to get in trouble for living a regular life, because we were so kind of, again, cocooned. But now I think people here in China, educators, students, finally will have a chance to take action, because we really were limited with action that we could take for a long time with local community, because no one was allowed to do anything. But
that makes sense. Definitely. And one of the things that I think is key, and consider this also, because I know there's, like every place, there's definitely issues that can be addressed locally in China. Yeah. And what I think is you need to experience it yourself as a student or a teacher. So it's okay I'm never going to turn down if someone just gives me $5 and says, here's a cause. But what's more effective is if I can take that person and show them where that $5 is going to go. If they can meet the orphans, if they can see the dirty river, if they can experience it themselves, then they're more likely to have a passion for it. And I think that's logistically more difficult. It's often skipped. But, if you know the village that you're working with, or if you know the river that you're cleaning up, or if you have paddled the mangrove or the intertidal zone, or whatever the project is going to be, the experience of that place or the people, I think, is key. Otherwise, you're just kind of throwing money at it, and that's not the solution, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I think the passions grow deeper when you're connected to it, right? When you can actually really get in there and experience it yourself, which is, I mean, again, I feel too like I've been kind of cocooned, and I'm kind of looking forward to breaking out of that cocoon. Right. I definitely am not a butterfly, but
right.
but yeah. No, I'm looking forward to, again, it's just, and it's even opening up more and more as we go, but it still feels weird for us here in China. Always, again, we talk about always kind of looking over our shoulder, but it's going to be great because we haven't had field trips in years either. That's something that, so I don't know if you saw on my social media, just I posted the other week, but we were finally able to, me and another teacher, take a group of middle school kids out to a beekeeper on a mountainside here and start connecting them. There was another teacher at our school who was passionate about bees. And unfortunately, I was re-listening to our episode 11. And I had been talking about when I interviewed you last summer at the beginning of the summer, how, I've adopted 6 beehives and stuff. Well, what ended up happening was I had stomach surgery in the summer, so I couldn't take care of the bees. And where we were keeping them got so hot that 5 hives absconded and left. So when I finally could get up and check, I had 5 empty hive boxes and one with a colony. And so what we've decided to do is we've partnered with an actual professional beekeeper who has lots of hives, who has way deeper knowledge than someone like me, who is a newbie. And we can throw a bunch of middle schoolers onto a bus on a Tuesday afternoon and drive into the mountain, and he's teaching them about bees, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, that is awesome. And just, to use that as an example, it's one thing if you teach in the classroom and you say, okay, we're going to learn about bees and why they're endangered and why they're important for pollinators. It's another thing to say, okay, we're going to have a fundraiser for bees. But the best thing is what you did, and you go see the bees, you experience, you talk to the professionals. And the other thing that I think is the best part is that it failed. I really love that. Like, it happened to us at Green School as well. We were keeping some bees and they all just disappeared. I don't know what happened, but that's a cool lesson to learn. And the most important follow-up part is perseverance. Well, let's try it again. Okay. What did we learn? We learned that don't keep them there for whatever reason. They didn't like that place and they left. So let's try another place.
Exactly. And those are some great lessons. I mean, and we were learning with those students, but we learned it where we had, it was too hot in the summer. And we also learned that there was a lot of hornets around. And then we learned about the different behavior of Asian Apis honeybees versus European honeybees, where those Asian honeybees are a lot more skittish. And when things are not going the way they like it, they'll just get out of there real fast. But yeah. Some great lessons.
I wouldn't know that. Exactly. And I wouldn't know that unless I did it. That's why the experience is the best part, right? Because you learned.
Absolutely. And kids learn that way. We grown-ups learn that way. Often the most impactful lessons are, it's a bit of an analogy, I guess, comparing on a smaller scale. The other night, my daughter, who's almost 10, was like, "Hey, Dad, where's a hot glue gun? Can't find the hot glue gun." I'm like, "All right, here it is." She's at home making crafts. I'm like, "Be careful. Don't burn yourself." She's like, "I'll be fine, Dad. You always say that to me." And then about 20 minutes later, she comes out. She's like, "Dad, I burned myself. It hurts." I'm like, "Put your fingers under the cold water." And I said to my wife, "You know what? There you go. There's something she can take from. I can say, be careful. You could burn yourself all day long. But until you actually experience it, then you know."
100% agree with you. I definitely agree. And that's something I'm always thinking about too. We can say that. Don't touch the stove. Don't touch the stove. But until you touch it and learn the reason why we're saying don't touch the stove, it doesn't really have a meaning. Yeah, so the experience is the best part.
I believe when I was a bit younger than her, I touched the stove.
Yes.
I also may have maybe poked around some electrical sockets with metal objects too.
Yes, I'm with you.
So that's what we did before we had iPads, right? There was nothing else to do. There was no YouTube, so we poked at dangerous things.
Exactly.
I see that on your LinkedIn, and this will be happening, I think, after this interview or before this interview comes out. But you are taking part in the Green Education webinar series, and I see you're going to be doing a presentation about bringing nature into the classroom. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because that's something that people who follow me on social media know that I'm always attempting to do, is bring nature into my classroom. So, yeah, can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about in that presentation?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this morning. I think it's coming up. I think it's on the 16th. I'm going to have to double check.
It says. No, it does say February 16th.
Like 11 days. Yeah. And just off the top of my head, I haven't actually written the outline yet, but I've given similar presentations and I put similar things on my Facebook as well. And just some of the ideas that I was thinking is, and I think maybe we talked about this before, like bringing a nature table into your classroom and having a sensory table with various things like skulls or neat pine cones or, leaves or neat, cool things, flowers, things that you find in nature when you're personally out hiking, like with your family or as an adult, you're just walking around and you find a cool thing. So thinking about that, how can we bring the nature into the classroom? Thinking about how can we start gardens or beekeeping? So two of the things that I know about is I know that some schools have like a rooftop garden or a balcony garden or even a windowsill garden.
Yeah.
And they learn all kinds of cool things, life cycle of plants, different types of fertilizer, watering, scheduling, collecting data, like what time do you water it or how much fertilizer do you put if you're using organic fertilizer, or even if you're using chemical fertilizer, like what are you doing? Collecting data, things like that. And then if you can go to the next level, which I know some schools do, is like cooking and eating whatever you grow. So, that sort of thing. I'm thinking about home gardens. I'm thinking about beekeeping because you're doing it. I know some schools are doing it. Like I said, we tried and they all flew away. So maybe we'll try again. But, how can we do that sort of thing? One thing I've just gotten is sort of like observation tanks. I'm not going to call them aquariums because I think I don't want to keep things long term.
Okay.
But like if I catch something cool, like I'll put it in the observation tank, and I'll have a couple like aquatic ones and maybe some terrestrial ones. And like maybe we'll catch some insects or we'll catch here like lizards, or even from the rice fields, we'll catch crabs. So let's just look at them and observe them and then put them back. After a couple of days, see how they grow and learn. So that's some of the things I'm thinking about. One of the things you mentioned that I think I'm going to start expanding on is I've recently started uploading some YouTube videos, and they're just really short. And maybe in the future I'll make more of the long form ones, but right now they're all under a minute long because they're that short format, kind of like the TikTok version. But how could I incorporate that? Like my idea for that is like they should be conversation starters. So you watch one of those, if you've seen some like about the tortoise beetle, well, that's a weird, cool looking creature. And it's like a 40-second clip of just a tortoise beetle that landed on my table one day. And then the teacher could see that, talk about it, generate some discussion, and then maybe do a unit on insects or a unit on beetles, or maybe go around your school ground and see if you can find cool stuff. So I'm just thinking of ways that we can incorporate nearby nature. If you're really lucky and you have some sort of outdoor classroom, outdoor space, if you have some sort of nature park, how can we think about all these things? Because I'm trying to think of every scenario. I'm at Green School and I'm really lucky. I have rice fields right out my classroom.
Yeah.
But I don't know any other school that has that. So trying to think of an urban school, trying to think of an inner city school, trying to think of schools in China, trying to think of schools in Thailand. And actually, I think I've got quite a following from Europe and North America, which is another total different scenario.
Yeah.
So how can we do those things? And part of it will be a brainstorm as well, and see what other people are doing.
Nice. But
well, those are the kind of things I'm thinking.
Some amazing things there and amazing ideas. And it's so interesting too, because like you said, like every school is so different and the situations are so different. I mean, there was an episode I did a few episodes after I interviewed you. I interviewed Taylor Murphy, who is the gardening teacher at West Portal Elementary School in San Francisco. And what an amazing setup they have for a big city school. And they have so much community buy-in, which is even something that I think is really special because not a lot of schools have that in Canada or America or anywhere. And how jealous am I that she literally is what they call the gardening teacher. I mean, like that's her position. She teaches gardening to kids, and what a fantastic thing that is. And that school is doing really progressive things. But even like you said, bringing things into the classroom. I've been having fantastic conversations because we were growing tomatoes in my classroom, but somehow ants found their way from outside, and I'm on the second floor. These little tiny ants found their way from outside through the window, and for whatever reason, like the tomato plants, and we found lines of ants going into the tomato plants. And when we would pick up the pot, there was literally thousands of ants in the base of the pot with brood and everything. And we eventually had to remove those. That was getting out of hand. But my class's teacher, me, Mr. O'Shea, I resorted to even collecting live geckos, and I was like bringing them into and I was like putting geckos on the plants and stuff. I'm like, we'll just see what happens, guys.
yeah, that's very cool.
So
and the lesson there is nature finds a way, right? How in the world did they find their way up there? I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's a cool thing that they did, and there you go.
And and then the kids in my room were just like, Mr. O'Shea, there's ants everywhere. I'm like, isn't it great? Like,
yeah.
In my classroom, this is okay. Other educators might scratch their heads and say, like, what are you doing? And why are you releasing geckos all over your room? But but the kids. But it's great that the kids who are with me, who've been with me long enough to know, they would never try to step on that gecko or even to catch it. They just let it go. They know that it's got a job to eat ants. But then we found a very dry gecko under the sofa the other day in my classroom. The kids are like, Mr. O'Shea, I think it's dead. I'm like, yes, it is.
Yep.
What happened? I don't know, but conversations are there to be had about nature indoors.
Yeah.
So you are now on. I don't want to keep you much longer. It's a Sunday morning, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. I'm curious about some updates. How I see you've got a lot of growth in your Facebook page. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Once again, it was just kind of started on a whim, and I didn't really have a plan, but a couple of those posts took off, and then I discovered I can share it with some other groups. There's quite a few groups out there of teachers and homeschoolers that want to, learn about nature or have lesson plans. So I just started sharing, and it just grew. I think soon we're going to reach 3,400, probably, in the next couple of days. And I just hope it keeps growing. At some point, I'm probably going to rewrite and republish my book with a bunch of activities. And so I was hoping to grow an audience for that. But everything now is free. All of the stuff that I'm putting on there, whether it's inspirational quotes, lesson plans, activities, ideas, safety, considerations. It's anything that a teacher or a parent or a, educator would want to know if they're taking their kids outdoors. So it's kind of random. I just kind of think, well, what can I talk about today? And like you said, ants. Well, that'd be a cool topic. Let me look up a few cool things about ants and what are some activities I've done with ants. And then maybe the next day it's like, one of my recent ones was sunflowers. And I was like, oh yeah, I think most people don't realize that a sunflower is a composite flower made up of hundreds of flowers. That's a lesson. And so I think what I've really learned, and this is a good one for everyone, those small things that we know and take for granted, many, many people don't know. So I'm trying to think of some of those obvious things like, ants are related to wasps. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lesson right there. And it just turns something similar or something simple into, just a cool activity that a teacher or a parent, homeschooler could do.
Well, I mean, you know what? That post that you shared about the sunflowers being composite flowers, I had no idea. And I literally have sunflowers growing on my balcony right now that I've planted from seeds. And I went outside after reading your post, and I put a macro lens on my camera, And
Oh, very nice.
I went outside. I don't think I've shared this yet on my social media, but I'm going to give you credit for inspiring me. I
Oh,
went out there and
nice.
I took macro shots of my sunflowers, and I had no idea. Like, I can see where the seeds are going to be, and there's like pollen on the end of the seeds, and I can see all those individual little tiny flowers everywhere. No idea. And
That's very cool, right?
And I'm a bug gardening guy. So there you go. We're always learning, and that was really cool for me. And as a grown up, I thought that was super neat. And I showed my wife, and she had no idea, and she's a gardener. So just there you go.
Yeah, and I've also learned, and one thing I've learned is it's kind of like you. I think I know stuff, and then I realize there's a lot that I don't know.
Exactly.
And I posted a video of a spider, and here in Bali and throughout Southeast Asia, we have these huge golden orb spiders. And the females are like 100 times bigger than the male.
Yeah.
So I posted a quick video on YouTube, and someone wrote back and said, actually, some of those are not males. They're what we call kleptoparasites.
Okay.
And I'd never heard of that. I was like, okay. So I looked up what is a kleptoparasitic spider, and lo and behold, I learned something new. It's basically a spider that will live in your web and steal your food. And they're parasitic in the sense that they steal from you, and they're kleptomaniacs because they're stealing your food. And so I was like, well, that's a cool lesson I learned.
Neat.
By me trying to teach something. So that was
because normally when you see one of those orb weavers, because I know, like, in my time in Japan, they had some, not as big, I'm sure, in Bali, but they had orb weaver spiders that got pretty massive by the fall, and you would always see these small spiders on their web, and I assumed that those were always just males, but maybe some of them weren't.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the cool part too. I get corrected once in a while, and I'm like, okay, you know more than I do.
Yeah.
So that's good.
That's one of those cool things, again, with the social media, that I follow on Twitter a lot of scientists, a lot of entomologists. And actually, on before the hiatus of this podcast, I had Dr. Jody Green on, who's an entomologist from Canada, working through the University of Nebraska Lincoln. And it was amazing to have her on, because she's kind of a guru of mine. I was really nerding out because I've been listening to her podcast for years, and to have her on, it was like, oh my gosh, one of my buggy heroes.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, so where can people find you online? And I've already mentioned everywhere, and I will put links in the show notes, but where can people find you? Yeah,
sure. It seems the two most sort of prolific and popular are the Facebook page and the LinkedIn page. Those are the two. And they also have the best format for me for sharing photos and lesson plans and activities. Twitter is okay, but you can't share as much. So I've started putting links. Like, if you want to learn more, click here, and it takes you to my Facebook.
Yeah.
And then same with Instagram. The format, I'm on there, and I like to post photos, but they don't seem to have the same impact or take off as well. So I think the best places are Facebook and LinkedIn. And I'm really kind of excited to keep going with the YouTube, just making short little clips, like 30-second to a minute clips. And maybe in the future, I'll think about making some longer ones. But right now, it's just like, oh, there's a cool thing. Let me take a quick video and put it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like I said, those are meant to, like, kind of start conversation in the classroom, like during the homeroom, or, we call it pod time, but whatever time when you have your kids for 10 or 15 minutes, just show a quick 1-minute video and talk about it and say, oh, that's a cool thing. That's a cool fact.
Yeah. Nice. That's, I have to admit, I'm just starting to realize the power of LinkedIn. I had no idea until really this, even in the last year, and even more so, I'm still learning. I had no idea so many people are on it. They'll be like, sometimes they get a thing like, would you like to join this teacher education group? There's 175,000 members. I'm like, really? Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So same.
There's a lot of potential on LinkedIn that I was not aware that was there.
I agree. Yeah. I'm with you. I'm just now sort of learning that.
I'm excited. I think with, for example, this podcast and some other content I hope to create with regards to environmental education, I'm really thinking LinkedIn may be the platform to really kind of launch things and make things expand. I'm hoping. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Cool. Well,
we'll see. We'll see. Keep posting. I think the thing is, what I think is just kind of be consistent, just keep posting things once or twice a week, tagging people, that like it. Yeah. Hopefully they share it, and that's it. Just consistency.
Yeah. And just build. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Kenny, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your insights and ideas. I really appreciate it. And I'm happy to be podcasting again, and looking forward to building this network that we're growing here. And we'll everyone out there listening, go check out all of Kenny's places on social media. All the links will be in the show notes here on all on my social media.
Right, and definitely I'll be sharing your podcast with all my contacts in my network, and I really love it. Thank you very much. I always look forward to chatting with you, and hopefully when you're in Malaysia, you'll be a bit closer to us in Bali. We can connect.
I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to being there and being able to travel. And there's a lot of places in Southeast Asia my wife and kids are excited to visit in the future for sure. Well, I want to thank Kenny so much for coming on the Nature Talks podcast. He is an inspiring guy doing some incredible things, and he is all over the place on social media. Go check out the links in the show notes of this episode. Follow him on Instagram. Follow him on Twitter. Follow him on Facebook and LinkedIn. Join his Box People Facebook group and LinkedIn, I should say. That's another social media place where we were talking about in this episode that we're both kind of unlocking the power of. I think he's got a little bit more going on there than I do, but he's just out there spreading the good word of outdoor education, getting kids outside and connecting them with nature. Because of course, we all know that when we have children who love outdoors, who love nature, who love wildlife, they're going to grow up to be people who love those things and people who will make a difference. And kids make a difference too, and absolutely they can. There are kids who are movers and shakers, and that's the goal for all of us, to help inspire children to take action. And we want to inspire all of you teachers and educators listening to take action as well. So follow Kenny in all those places. Follow me on Twitter @MadForMaple. Come on over to Instagram, where I'm at Shizen Wildlife, SHIZEN Wildlife. All right, that link's going to be in the show notes as well. That is my kind of professional environmental education Instagram. Come over to the, of course, Nature Talks Podcast Facebook page and give us a follow or a like over there. And just come and hang out. Be part of the conversation. And, of course, please take the time to rate this podcast where you listen to it. Give us a rating, give us a review, and share it with other educators you work with administrators you work with. Okay? Spread the word of environmental education. Think globally, act locally. That's the key. All right. We want to inspire you to care about the world, but also to take action. And we as educators often need to lead by example. I need to take action. You need to take action. And hopefully those we work with, the kids in our lives, the students, our own children, the people around us will also then be inspired to take action. All right, well, that's it for episode number 19 of the Nature Talks podcast. My name's Kevin O'Shea. I'm an international educator from Canada, living in Asia, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen, and I really appreciate it. So I hope you are having an awesome day wherever you are, and I will be talking to you really soon.